Greetings all. This is the newsletter going out to subscribers on February 14th. You can read the printed version on my website. Links will be provided to any pertinent links mentioned in the newsletter. The title is 2021's Cautiously Optimistic Psychic Forecast. Keep your heart open and your powder dry. Starting with a quote to go with the first picture or image by Rumi. The body is a device to calculate the astronomy of the spirit. Look through that astrolabe and become oceanic. Dear one, I hope this holiday missive finds you well and at peace with what is. The good news is that no matter how challenging our external circumstances presently are, there's some light pouring in this spring as we slowly emerge from our collective dark night of the soul. For those of us on the path of awakening, the global pandemic is giving us a more important FGO, aka F and growth opportunity, than any lesser circumstances could have instigated. And this great boon is to allow our ego armor to soften as our hearts open wider and deeper with benevolence and empathy for ourselves and our fellow souls all over the planet. As Pema Chödrön says, quote, "What is the best use of each day of our lives? In one very short day, each of us could become more sane, more compassionate, more tender, more in touch with the dreamlike quality of reality. Or we could bury all these qualities more deeply and get more in touch with solid mind, retreating more into our own cocoon." Unquote. Keeping our hearts open also means cultivating faith that everything is evolving perfectly in the divine plan for soul growth and karmic healing for each of us. If you find it hard to maintain this faith when the going gets tough, please feel free to borrow some of mine, which is unconditional and boundless. Also, it helps to hold an emotional tone of cosmic humor as we incredulously witness global events playing out. It seems more and more as if we're in a live-action sci-fi movie, with mutant strains popping up daily, homegrown terrorists plotting insurrection led by a sociopathic ex-president, and conspiracy theory devotees fueled by social media dumbing down the mass consciousness to ever new lows of fear-based ignorance. When I did a New Year's reading for myself last month, which I do every year, I was informed that because of the continuing quarantine, which has enforced a much more extended inward focus of time and energy than in this life to date, my psychic and spiritual evolution has accelerated by over 20 years from the previous timeline probabilities. This warp speed, supported by the quickening of galactic, cosmic, and planetary energies, as well as boosted by more and more powerful solar flares, has moved me to a very new place in terms of a more expanded concept of identity. Although, as always, it's very challenging for the nervous system to acclimate to the higher frequencies moving in. I keep hearing about this speeded up inner growth from many of you as well. For more on the ever-accelerating energies of the quickening, which I define as the bombardment of the earth plane with high velocity frequencies as a divine catalyst to speed up the evolution of consciousness. And then there are links to more on the quickening. The Bardo of Bombardment is one, and the other is How to Be in Paradise During a Cosmic Flu Pandemic, which I wrote a few months before the pandemic was news. The major transit of 2021, which kicks off this week on February 17th, is a combative one between Karmic Teacher Saturn and humanitarian Aquarius, squaring off with Trickster of Awakening Uranus in comfort-loving Taurus. This contentious square will be in effect for the entire year, coming to a head or point of crisis in mid-June and culminating at the end of December 2021. The theme of this, which we can already see playing out on the world stage, the themes of this are that Saturn, who rules the structure and rules of the Earth game, is vigilantly doing his job via the administration, higher authorities, and the powers that be to oversee laying down new regulations for the highest good of all concerned. For the role of government, even for libertarians, is to protect the populace from collective threats such as the pandemic as well as homegrown political violence. But Uranus is also doing his job as the ruler of individual freedom, rebellion, revolution, and the internet, especially the Wild West atmosphere of social media. And since Saturn is in his traditional co-ruler of Aquarius, which is also the natural ruler of Uranus, Saturn may go overboard in trying to suppress your Uranian-ruled free speech and the First Amendment. Not to mention that with Uranus and Taurus ruling the stock market, banks, and financial regulation, we'll continue to see more than the usual amount of unpredictable and at times extreme ups and downs in all money, real estate, and material security areas, personally and en masse, fueled by the irrational exuberance of the cosmic trickster, whose function is always to shake us up, to wake us up. Uranus is up in arms against all this Saturnian authority telling us what we can and cannot do, as it is limiting our enjoyment of the comforts that Taurus so loves by requiring mask wearing, restricting travel and gatherings, and just in general imposing rules on our daily lives, which cramps our style and, for many of us, our ability to make a living. Saturn in altruistic Aquarius may say that all the restrictions imposed are quote-unquote for the highest good of all concerned in the long run. But Trickster Uranus wants individual liberty and wants it now! Exclamation point. We all have Saturn and Uranus as components of our personality in our birth charts. But some of us are more Saturnian or Uranian by nature. This year, when Saturn and Uranus by transit trigger sensitive points or planets in our baseline birth chart in the houses or areas of our lives ruled by Aquarius and Taurus, we'll get to experience an exacerbated or enhanced expression of our natal predispositions. These transits may make us feel internally a bit crazed or at odds with ourselves, and externally as if the outer world is so crazy that we either feel more and more detached from it or more and more confrontational with it. It's easy to see who is doubling down with embracing the pandemic-fueled new rules and regulations and even wanting more stringent ones. That's unequivocally a Saturnian type. And those that are up in arms, literally at times, demanding their freedom and individual liberties no matter who might be harmed in the process, that's a Uranian type for sure. And you can tell that I'm a Saturnian type, reinforced many times over in my natal chart, in every area except romance and mysticism, by how I phrase this paragraph. For more, there's a link to Becoming One with the Inner Guru, or How to Make Saturn Your BFF. So with this major transit theme of 2021, we need to choose our battles wisely and not sweat the small, ephemeral stuff. Sure, if we go along with all of Saturn's big daddy rules and regulation, we may feel a bit squished or diminished in our freedom of choice on the ego levels. Conversely, if we are cavalierly operating with a sense of personal entitlement in a way that could possibly cause others harm, we are definitely incurring some karma sooner or later. This is especially so for those in any position of power, such as quote-unquote influencers on social media, touting nonsensical conspiracy theories and advocating Uranian rebellion from no mask wearing to outright violence and anti-vaccines. If we feel the desire to rebel too overtly against restrictions, it behooves us to look at our level of emotional maturity especially if we're fighting against health or safety rules that are not really life-threatening deal breakers individually in the short run, although they may feel important on the 2-year-old toddler little self-ego personality levels. For more on this, here's a perfect send-off to the ex-toddler-in-chief who has Uranus on his sun natally. And there's a link to the soul-level curriculum, the karmic consequences of entitlement, and it might not be what you think. I think I wrote this one just when Trump was coming into his office. So we can keep our powder dry and stay vigilant of those actions which best serve our most important interests, and not sweat the small stuff so much just to be a freedom-loving, rebellious Uranian teenager emotionally. Freedom is surely an inside job ultimately, regardless of external restrictions that test our all-rightness at the core of our inner state of being. When Uranus first moved into Taurus on March 6, 2019, I wrote that we need to prepare ourselves as we witness more and more of that which has been known and safe falling away. And now, with Uranus continuing his journey in Taurus through April 2026, we can expect even more phases of this particular cycle of karmic lessons coming our way on all levels, inner and outer. For more, there's a link to all your stagnant comfort zones are gone, which I wrote to prepare us for Uranus moving into Taurus. Because expansive Jupiter is also in Aquarius, he is amplifying Saturn's role, inciting him to operate a bit unrestrainedly in the rules and regulations department. But it does reinforce my prediction that Saturn may reign over Uranus slightly this year in terms of their functions by sign. Added to this is the fact that we've just entered the Chinese year of the metal ox, whose characteristics are much more aligned with Saturn's rule of law. And closing this section of the newsletter, there's a quote by my favorite astrologer, or one of my favorites, Alan Oken, whose books are very good beginning books for learning astrology. Quote, "In essence, the awakened heart functions in some form of service to humanity in Aquarius, allowing personal love to be an agent for transpersonal love." On a timely note, February is a month when our heart minds instinctively turn more towards love, even if this is culturally induced by V-Day. So even though our heart's pilot light never goes completely out, as it is fueled by an infinite supply of divine love, this is a time, especially with Saturn in transpersonally-loving Aquarius, when we can allow more love to fill us from source, so that our hearts can blaze brighter and burn away any accumulated dross or debris that has blocked our love light from shining out more brightly to nourish ourselves, all those in our lives, and the earth plane itself in a natural overflow or ripple effect. As we focus on love, which I call the gold standard in terms of what all human beings are ultimately seeking as the essence of true abundance, it's important to keep in mind how many varieties of love there are. From love of plants, animals, and nature, to friends and family, to the juicy romantic and erotic varieties, and ultimately, just pure love with being and all of life, whether one calls it the flow, the Tao, the divine, or source. In Greek philosophy, the varieties of love were broken down into 7 categories. Here's the list of the 7 categories, which is adapted with updated personal commentary from an article in Psychology Today magazine. 1. Eros is sexual or passionate love, and is the type most akin to our modern construct of romantic love. In Greek myth, it is a form of madness brought about by one of Cupid's arrows. The arrow breaches us and we fall in love. Or I say we don't fall, but rather either step in it or rise in it. As did Paris with Helen, leading to the Trojan War and the downfall of Troy and much of the assembled Greek army. Eros has also been contrasted with Logos or reason, and Cupid painted as a blindfolded child. The second variety of love is called philia, which is love based on friendship. Aristotle believed that a person can bear goodwill to another for one of 3 reasons: that he is useful, that he is pleasant, and above all that he is good, that is, rational and virtuous. Friendships founded on goodness are associated not only with mutual benefit, but also with companionship, dependability, and trust. For Plato, the best kind of friendship is that which lovers have for each other. It is a philia born out of eros, and that in turn feeds back into eros to strengthen and develop it, transforming it from a lust for possession into a shared desire for a higher level of understanding of the self, the other, and the world. In short, philia transforms eros from mere lust into an impulse for shared growth for souls on a journey of awakening. Real friends stick together to live truer, fuller lives by relating to each other authentically and teaching each other about the limitations of their beliefs and the defects in their character, which are a far greater source of error than mere rational confusion. They are, in effect, each other's therapist, so it helps to find a friend with some degree of openness, insight, and communication skills, both to change and to be changed. This brings to mind a quote by M. Scott Peck, which has been a guiding light for me for decades and my criterion for choosing romantic partners and friends. Quote, "Love is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. Love is as love does. Love is an act of will, namely, both an intention and an action. Will also implies choice. We do not have to love. We choose to love," unquote. The third variety of love is called storge, or familial love, as a kind of philia pertaining to the love between parents and their children. It differs from most philia in that it tends, especially with younger children, to be unilateral or asymmetrical. More broadly, storge is the fondness born out of familiarity or dependence, and unlike eros or philia, does not depend on personal qualities. People in the early stages of a romance often expect unconditional storge, but find only the need and dependency of eros, and if they're lucky, the maturity and fertility of philia. Given enough time, eros tends to be transmuted into storge. The fourth variety of love is agape, which is universal love, such as the love for strangers, nature, or the divine. Unlike storge, it does not depend on filiation or familiarity. Also called charity by Christian thinkers, agape can be said to encompass the modern concept of altruism, defined as unselfish concern for the welfare of others. Recent studies link altruism with a number of benefits. In the short term, altruism leaves us with a euphoric feeling, the so-called helper's high. In the longer term, it is associated with better mental and physical health, as well as longevity. Given the increasing anger, fear, and division in our society, as well as the state of our planet, we could all do with quite a bit more agape. In the Buddhist traditions, agape equates with the cultivation of bodhicitta, or loving kindness and compassion, as expressed through the bodhisattva vow. Quote, "With a wish to free all beings, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I reach full enlightenment. Enthused by wisdom and compassion, today in the Buddha's presence, I generate the mind for full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. As long as space remains, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain and dispel the miseries of the world. Beings are numberless, I vow to awaken them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are endless, I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable, I vow to become it," unquote. The fifth variety of love is called ludus, as playful or uncommitted love. It can involve activities such as teasing and dancing, or more overt flirting, seducing, and sexual relations. The focus is on fun and sometimes also on conquest with no strings attached. Ludus relationships are casual, undemanding, and uncomplicated, but for all that can be very long-lasting. Ludus works best when both parties are mature and self-sufficient. Problems arise when one party mistakes ludus for eros, whereas ludus is in fact much more compatible with philia. Friends with benefits indeed. One of my criterion for romantic relationships has always been, and this I ask clients too if they're considering getting more involved with someone, is do you enjoy playing the same games of life together? Can you be like children and playful together? And this is ludus, or playful love. The sixth variety of love is called pragma, which is a kind of practical love founded on reason or duty and one's longer-term interests. Sexual attraction takes a backseat in favor of personal qualities and compatibilities, shared goals, and making it work. In the days of arranged marriages, pragma was very common, and although out of fashion these days, it remains widespread, most visibly in certain high-profile celebrity and political pairings, as well as more traditional cultural and religious communities. Many relationships that start off as eros or ludus end up as various combinations of storge and pragma. Pragma may seem opposed to ludus, but the two can coexist, with the one providing a counterpoint to the other. In the best of cases, the partners in the pragma relationship agree to turn a blind eye or even a sympathetic eye, as is the case of Simone de Beauvoir and Jean-Paul Sartre, or Vida Sackville-West and Harold Nicholson. The seventh variety of love is philotia, which is self-love, which can be healthy or unhealthy. Unhealthy self-love is akin to hubris, overweening pride and narcissism. In ancient Greece, a person could be accused of hubris if he placed himself above the gods, or, like certain modern politicians, above the greater good. Many believe that hubris led to destruction or nemesis. Today, hubris has come to mean an inflated sense of one's status, abilities, or accomplishments, especially when accompanied by haughtiness or arrogance. As it disregards truth, hubris promotes injustice, conflict, and enmity. There is, of course, a kind of permeability between the seven types of love, which continuously over time keeps morphing back and forth between all varieties, helping us expand the emotional range of our humanness, which is one of the purposes of reincarnational cycles for soul development. Especially important for 2021, healthy self-love, which is similar to self-esteem, is our cognitive and above all emotional appraisal of our own worth relative to that of others. More than that, it's the matrix through which we think, feel, and act, and reflects and determines our relationship to ourselves, to others, and to the world. I'm a huge proponent of what I call healthy selfishness, which I describe metaphorically as to always remember when on an airplane to place the oxygen mask on oneself before on the baby in our lap. I also believe that what we choose to do for the highest good for our own soul growth is ultimately for the highest good of all concerned. For how could it not be if we are one being with billions of faces? However, there is a caveat to healthy selfishness on the personality levels these days, and that is that the sign of a truly mature soul, which responsible-minded Saturn governs, is to view placing the oxygen mask on our collective soul first as one being before we place the oxygen mask on ourselves. How we operate collectively now is perhaps one of the greatest tests to date of how we're doing in terms of the spiritual evolution of consciousness as a race, as nothing less than the present global pandemic could lead us to the higher truth of unity consciousness, in which we're all in this together and always have been. As the WHO said, quote, "No one is safe from the pandemic until everyone is," unquote. In closing, wishing us all a daily practice of gratitude for all the varieties of love and abundance in our lives in the eternal now, as well as glass half full attitude adjustments from the witnessing perspective of our souls. I'm holding the vision of herd immunity in the USA and other developed countries by this summer, and globally by mid-2022, with over 70% vaccinated, and with the support of ongoing Saturn and Aquarius pandemic protection measures. While some may claim optimism is delusional, especially so in the present day dark ages of the Kali Yuga, there is science-based research that optimists live longer than pessimists and, in my opinion, enjoy a much better quality of life. So I'll stick with my always glass half full chosen view. One of the best books on optimism from a historical perspective is by Steven Pinker and is Bill Gates' favorite book. And there's a link to Enlightenment Now, The Case for Reason, Science, Humanism, and Progress. Of all spiritual philosophies, my favorite is Leela, aka Cosmic Play, followed by Becoming One with the Tao, aka Going with the Flow, as well as Maya, aka Life is a Dream or Illusion. And of course, I also love and practice Tantra, which embraces the senses, emotions, and awareness, all as vehicles on the path. So it makes being in a precious human incarnation in the Earth game like an all-inclusive resort. In this time of accelerated inner growth, if you're seeking a new way to look at your life and a new philosophy to live by, why not consider one that offers you the most pleasure, joy, and bliss regardless of external flux? For more, there's links to my spiritual practices reading list and my article on pleasure, joy, and bliss. Finally, here are my soul level resolutions for 2021 and beyond. 1. Enjoy the ride today even more by acting as if each day is our last, and smile. 2. Hold the faith that life goes on, our souls live on, and that which we have always been seeking, Source, has been inside us all along, and smile. And 3. Be grateful that life is doing its damnedest to help us remember why we are truly here, and just keep on smiling. Sending out ongoing transmissions of visceral pleasure, joy in being, and bliss body shenanigans. And I close with 2 quotes. The first by Gandhi, "My commitment is to truth, not consistency." And the second by Walt Whitman, "Do I contradict myself? Very well, then I contradict myself. I am large, I contain multitudes."